You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. I'm joined by my special guest today, Jodi Forlizzi. Hi, Jodi. How are you?
Hello.
Great to have you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Jodi Jodi, your bio is impressive. But before we get to the bio, I want to throw one thing in about you, which is that you're the closing speaker at Designing with AI. It's the first year we've done this conference. It's taking place June 4th and 5th virtually. And Jodi's one of our two invited speakers, along with Dan Hill. And Jodi's closing things out. So I slipped that little detail in. But here's what they really want to know, what your amazing bio includes. And it really is pretty impressive. You're the Herbert A. Simon Professor of HCI at a little place called Carnegie Mellon University, where you are teaching, you're a professor of computer science and HCI, although you kind of blew my mind by saying that your background is in art. You have an art degree? An MFA?
Yes, that's right. I am a first-gen student. My parents did not go to college, and I went to the University of Arts in Philadelphia, where I studied illustration. And after undergrad, aside from being a waitress, because there aren't a lot of jobs for illustrators, I actually worked at University of Pennsylvania doing technical illustrations for the faculty. And I think that in the faculty in engineering, actually, I should say, and I think that was a really formative time because I collaborate with scientists every day. And then around that time, the internet was really coming to bear, and designers needed new ways of working. The UX designer role was starting, and then I decided to go to grad school, and I ended up in the first group of Masters of Interaction Design students at Carnegie Mellon University, and that was a really exciting time.
Studying with folks like Dick Buchanan?
Dick Buchanan and Dan Boyarsky, Suguru Ishizaki, very formative characters in my career.
I love that story, and it reminds me just a little bit of my own. I got a degree in history from Michigan, which set me up perfectly to be a waiter. So here we are today. Go figure.
Well, I will tell you, one of my big projects, which I'll be touching on at the conference, is some work we're doing in the hospitality industry. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, before we get to that, your path is taking you to AI, and specifically responsible AI is part of your remit at Carnegie Mellon, and you're also an associate dean of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the School of Computer Science. So those are interesting areas that intersect. I mean, there's so much intersection in your career between those two areas: art, computer science, HCI. And what your talk is about, your talk's titled Design and AI Innovation. So that's a whole nother thing. And when you first proposed this topic, I got really interested because I feel like what isn't about innovation when it comes to AI? I mean, yes, I guess AI can help us do certain things that we've always been doing faster, more efficiently, sure. But I think most people, when they talk about innovation today in general, they're probably talking about AI. It's practically a drinking game. How can you, are you looking to help designers and other UX folks make sense of AI? Well, let me put it to you this way. What's the big picture of understanding how we're going to be innovating with AI? How do you draw boundaries around it? It just seems like so broad. What is the sort of boundary? Let me leave it at that around this topic.
Right. Well, I think one way to delineate this vastly growing space, very dynamic space, is that we have designing with AI, which is using AI-enabled tools in the design process, of which there are more and more every day. Or where I'm focusing is designing AI, which is figuring out how to use AI as a design material. So that's really the work that I'm doing. I'm less about the AI enabled tools, although I do engage with them. I think that for that reason, really what we design and how we design is changing a lot. And there's some staggering statistic about the numbers of AI products that fail. I think it's like 80% of AI concepts don't make it to market. And of the 20% that do, only 40% of those succeed. So there's a lot of failure in AI innovation. And when you think about innovation, you think about the development of the technology, which is typically done by technologists. But the innovation is where designers take it and make it into a viable, desirable product. So one example we always like to talk about is the Philips cassette recorder, right? It was a technical capability. We could record sound on tape, but they didn't really know what they were going to do with it. And then there was a whole era of Sony Walkman, mixtapes, personal stereos. I think that was really revolutionary in society in terms of how we listened and consume music. So for me, that's a nice story of technical development and then design innovation, really thinking about products that people would desire.
So new products, a lot of failure going on right now. Uh, this is kind of a hard one to answer, I suppose, but do you feel like we're failing more than we should be? Are we going in
Well,
with
I
eyes
think,
open enough to know what some of the implications are?
you
And
know, every week, what is available to the types of AI that we can innovate with become more complex, more ethical, more. But I think, when we talk about this in our work, we say that there's basically four reasons why AI products fail. The first is that we can't build the model that will be successful, and that could be because the data is unavailable or poor, or there's inference problems or things that the technical team didn't figure out. The second is that we can develop it, but then the product doesn't generate enough value to the company to make it worthwhile. The third is nobody wants it. It doesn't generate customer value. And then the fourth, of course, is when there are risks of privacy, ethics, bias, what's often called fate risks, which
Mhm.
is where responsible AI comes in. So these are four giant hurdles that successful AI products need to get over. And in a lot of places, the product development is being led by technical teams, right? Same old story. So we need designers with their innovation processes at the table earlier.
So, and really, in a way that could head off all four of those potential challenges, right? Designers have a role in each of those.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing designers recognizing that, or sitting this out for any reason?
I think that, I teach right now I'm teaching a course called The Design of AI Products and Services, and we have a lot of different consumers in our class. We have design students, HCI students, business students, product management students. We have information systems students, computer science students. And sometimes what we hear in the work is that someone takes on a bridging role. So, yes, maybe I was trained as a UX designer, but I'm now becoming the custodian of privacy and ethical issues around my product. So now I want to, I want to go back to school and have a broader view of the kinds of work I'm doing and a more purposeful view of how I contribute to this product development team. So I think that's happening. And then I think also for traditional design programs, we can't just be like ostriches and stick our heads in the sand about AI. We really need to create a familiarity with it and a mechanism for designing with it.
So, do you find that your students tend to be a little more on the techno optimist side of things, or does that line up with what their home practices are? Are computer science students looking at this differently than design students, or Uh,
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say techno optimism, but I think there's a strong inclination in society to do good right now.
mhm,
So I think the products we develop do want to bring technology to bear for purposeful and pragmatic things. I think a lot of people that come to our class have, you know, evolved into this bridging role, and they're feeling like they're lacking something in terms of designing with AI. So I think that's why we have such a broad audience. And then students have come back and, told us that they took benefit from different parts of the course. So for example, um, when you're designing with AI, it's very hard to start with the customer. So what we try to do is we would start, if you envision the double diamond, which is the design process, we would start in the middle.
mhm,
And we would start with data or a technical capability. So let's say I'm going to use face recognition. And so one cool example of how this was used was the Snapchat filters, right? Like it could recognize where the eyes were and then make you into a puppy or a tuxedo or whatever. That is a really nice example of looking at a capability, designing something, and then finding a customer afterwards,
mhm.
right? It was fantastic on Snapchat. A lot of times, traditionally trained designers really struggle to do that. So you have to teach them to engage with data and start really in the middle of the double diamond.
So this idea of bridge building, or some people might call it gap filling, but
Mm-hmm.
this sort of in a new space, certain kinds of people are drawn to identify things that aren't getting done. They sort of feel it, and they sort of, for whatever reason, feel like they need to step into that gap.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like nobody else is going to do it, or nobody else sees it, or whatever it might be. Um, are you finding that those bridgers are coming from a particular domain or perspective? And do you are you starting to get a picture of where they should be going? Like 20 years ago, those people may have become UX people because there wasn't really that sort of synthetic bringing things together, and so like a lot of the early UX people were folks that were taking on things nobody else wanted to do. Maybe a generation earlier, that's where project managers came from. And maybe we're seeing something like that here. And is that role starting to be clear? Is it starting to emerge as a role unto itself with a label of its own?
Well, I think that not only are UX designers and project managers taking this on, I think many roles in different teams have done this, because I think that large and small companies, startups, companies in different domains, they're all approaching the design of AI-driven products differently. And
Mhm,
there is some new research that shows that this kind of bridging expertise is an expertise in and of itself that is domain independent. And there was a paper by a researcher named Will Barley that looked at the expertise of uh, nurses who did triage in emergency settings,
mhm.
and they showed empirically that this was its own kind of expertise. So I suspect in this complex collaboration that AI is, that we're getting to some of this too. And like I said, I think it comes in all roles.
It's not, but it's not, or is it like uh, a role that you're trying to design your curriculum for, or is it way too soon?
We're not designing bridging expertise per se, but we're looking at the development of a AI-driven product systemically. We're not looking at just one thing like the customer.
Mhm.
We're looking at stakeholders and customers, technical feasibility, business viability. So we train people to look at those three vectors as they develop.
And I'm kind of digging into this a little more than maybe either of us anticipated, because I keep thinking to the UX people from years ago or the project managers. Um, I'm, like think about webmasters in 1995, and how many of them were excited by this new thing that seemed to need doing that nobody really necessarily knew how to do. And if you were a webmaster in the late 90s, one webmaster might be doing very different things than another webmaster. But
Right.
many of them were coming from areas like technical communication
Mhm.
or psychology, or like someone like me, library science, who were, had skills that really had a lot of value, but needed to be brought into a new environment and maybe even rebranded in order to have careers.
Mhm.
And I just wonder if we're starting to see that here again, where instead of, let's say the technical communicator becoming a UX writer, we're seeing now the UX writer is becoming something all new in this AI context.
Well, I suspect that is going to happen because it happened with, the internet. So
Right.
it happened with the ham radio and, trains that carried freight along tracks. So I think this is simply a churn of technology. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, also these roles have a half life. They start off as roles or functions, and then they become attributes. Uh, I mean, I'm sure there were people who were experts in the telephone at one time, and that,
Right, exactly.
became just something that we just take for granted and is embedded in everything. I suspect that looking at AI as a design material is wrapped up in that whole life cycle of something that starts off obviously new and ill-defined, and sense making happens, and then we have something that's a role. And well, I'll tell you what, I'd love to dig into this, but I think we'll take a quick break. And everyone listening in, I hope you're enjoying our conversation with Jodi Forlizzi. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Lou. I got a interesting announcement for you. I think you'll be happy to hear this, because you're probably someone who has to prioritize things. Well, our next book, Managing Priorities: How to Create Better Plans and Make Smarter Decisions, long-awaited book by Harry Max. It is now available for pre-order from Rosenfeld Media at 15% off. The book comes out for real on May 14th, 2024. So that's coming up fast. It is, as far as I can tell, the only book out there that's all about managing priorities. That's it. And it's good if you're an individual with priorities. I know you are. Also, if you have a team that needs prioritization, or even an organization. So pick up a copy of Harry Max's Managing Priorities today, now available for pre-order at 15% off from rosenfeldmedia.com. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. Lou Rosenfeld here, talking with Jodi Forlizzi of Carnegie Mellon University. And we had touched on the topic just before the break of AI as a design material. And, we use this term design material a lot. Maybe it gets overused a bit, but I think in this case, this is a design material. This is something a little different, but it is, it is, well, let me ask the person who really knows about it as a design material. How do you see it being different than other design materials, Jodi?
Well, in some ways, we can look at it the same as we would look at clay or pixels. One thing we like to talk about is Donald Schoen's conversation in action. He talked about reflection in action, reflection on action, and a conversation with material. And I think reflection in action is like the jazz player improvising and making new music, or the potter working with clay. And reflection on action is when we step back and critique what we've done and figured out what steps work. And conversation with material is this dialogue that's happening. I think those things happen with AI, but you know, we can't plan everything, right? Like we can set a series of consequences, but we don't really know how the AI is going to work. I mean, look at these products like Tay and Meta's Scientific Galactica. They hallucinated, they put out false
Mhm.
papers and documents like bears conducting research on the moon. And these kinds of things can't be anticipated. So,
By the way, as an academic, that's got to be a pretty darn good publishing agenda, right? Is to identify all the hallucinations and write for those. But anyway, I do
well, just
digress.
looking at Kai, I think there's over 100 papers on LLMs alone. I'm not done looking yet. I'm going to have a very busy time reading all that. But the other thing I want to say is that then it invites designers who are usually planners and the people who are the custodians for the users and stakeholders. They have to do this consequence scanning and think forward and backward about what happens if this goes wrong? What happens if that goes wrong? And so I think that's a little bit worse or different or
Mm-hmm.
more detailed than thinking about errors in something like a website or a communication or something that we design.
Or a clay sculpture,
Or a
right?
clay sculpture, that's right.
So implications are a big one, and I'm sure this is related. But what about um, the constraints that the medium brings? It seems like we understand the constraints of clay pretty well. Bits are another story. Um, when we're talking about AI, we're often talking about semantic content. In fact, I heard one of our authors, who's also on the program, Jorge Arango, earlier today. I'm going to totally mess up the quote, but he talked about what spreadsheets and calculators are for data, LLMs are for language, and it does make you think. Like language, semantic material is very well, it's unstructured, it's open, it's got some structure, but it's a different thing. And how does that impact how we use it as a design material?
Well, I certainly think there are designers that have drawn the analogy between conversation and AI, and Paul Pangaro comes to mind. But
Paul
I'm
was
not even.
great, by the way. We had him speak a year ago, and
Oh, good. That's
yeah.
great. And so, let's see. What am I supposed to be commenting on? I lost my
Well, I
thread.
mean, so a design material that is, in many cases, language and
Tokens. I would say tokens. I would
tokens.
abstract that even more. And so, in some sense, while a naive designer might want to load all this capability onto AI, it's really a system that's searching for the next token. So in our class, we just did a project with large language models. And the goal and desire of students is to design the most complicated thing in the world, but a lot of times it's unfeasible. And there's this analogy they use at Google called the drunk island, which is like, what could a bunch of drunk people on an island do? They could do something that's okay. So we tell our students to search in the space of simple, dumb AI or the drunk island, because there's lots of opportunity for simple, robust AI to improve things that we need. And so I think this is another thing that's a little bit different about how we design too. So I'm not really sure if that answers your question.
Well, I'm not sure if my question is answerable, but I think maybe that's the thing in a way, is that we are at the point where we're just starting to get our arms around the questions.
Right. And we were chatting in the break and I was talking to you about how, my work with AI as a designer continues to broaden and change. And it's really quite different than the kind of design work I was doing even 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
3
Yeah.
years ago. So,
Well, maybe one of the other things that we should keep in mind while we're working with this new design material is to take a breath once in a while. Just slow down if we can. It's not going away. It's not an if, it's a when, and it's going to be a when from now on. So let's not rush too much. Hey, Jodi, this has been a wonderful conversation. In Rosenfeld Review tradition, though, I want to know what gift you brought for our listeners, something that they should know about that they might not.
Well, I want to talk about something historical. I was looking back at some of the early work in UX design, and there was a group of researchers at TU Delft, and later they moved to TU Eindhoven. And it was led by a gentleman named Kees Overbecke, who has since passed away, but he really encouraged his interaction design research group to look at design with different lenses like fun and emotion and interaction. And they had run a couple of workshops on candy machines, and they had these very stern researchers act out both really frugal, parsimonious vending machines that delivered little morsels of food that they told the calories of, to this fun vending machine where people put their hands and buckets of candy poured out. And then later they developed this concept called friendly vending, which I really love. These soda machines would respond to a passerby by turning as if they had faces or locuses of interaction. And then if a customer came and pointed at one that they wanted to buy, the can of soda popped up and sort of presented itself with a little wiggle. And so I really think that we can reach back to some of this historical design and dig out things that are relevant to now. There was just something so pure and beautiful about that movement. It's really simple, but altogether it's like an elegant orchestra. So that's my gift.
I love that. We'll get the links from you to make sure we put them in the show notes. And I just want to say I love it, and I'm grateful that they did it with a soda machine and not a butcher shop. Eat me. Oh my God. Okay. Well, Jodi Forlizzi, thank you so much for joining us today. I am really, really excited about the talk you'll be giving at Designing with AI at our conference, virtual conference, taking place June 4th and June 5th, and a bunch of workshops too, including one of your colleagues, Dan Saffer, who's
My
got
co-teacher in the design of AI products and services, so you can try out aspects of the
That's
course.
right. In fact, a lot of people want to do that. They're signing up in droves. So
Excellent.
everyone, I hope you'll get to hear Jodi's talk at the conference. And Jodi, thanks again for being part of the conference and joining us today. It's great talking with you.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Lou. Thank you for listening to the latest Rosenfeld Review podcast. I really appreciate it. I would love to hear from you. And if you want to pop me an email, lou@rosenfeldmedia.com, tell me what you thought. Better yet, leave me the hell alone and post a review on your favorite podcast platform. Please feed the algorithm. It really does make a difference. We want to get the word out. If you like the word, give us a hand. And while I'm asking you for favors, don't forget, buy books. Support your favorite local independent publisher. We happen to be one, rosenfeldmedia.com. All those great UX books are there. So, thanks again.